The 1930s in America was a pivotal decade marked by the Great Depression and the rise of notorious criminal figures who seized the moment of societal despair to pursue a life of crime. Among the most infamous were Ma Barker, the formidable matriarch of the Barker-Karpis gang, and Alvin Creepy Karpis, an influential member of her criminal enterprise. Their exploits not only captured the public's imagination but also reflected the broader socio-economic pressures of the era. This comprehensive analysis dives deep into their backgrounds, the evolution of their criminal activities, the law enforcement response, and the enduring legacy of their actions. The background of Ma Barker. Early life. Arizona Donnie Clark, later known as Ma Barker, was born on October 8, 1873, in Ash Grove, Missouri. Her early life was marked by modest beginnings in the Ozark Mountains. In 1892, she married George Barker, and together they had 4 sons: Herman, 1893 to 1927, Lloyd, 1897 to 1949, Arthur Doc, 1899 to 1939, and Fred, 1901 to 1935. Around 1910, the Barker family relocated to Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Tulsa, the Barker sons became involved in criminal activities from a young age. Herman, for instance, was arrested in 1910 for highway robbery after a getaway incident resulted in a child's injury. Over the years, the brothers' offenses escalated to more serious crimes, including robbery and murder. They were associated with the Central Park Gang, a group of juvenile criminals in Tulsa. Ma Barker's role during this period has been subject to debate. Some accounts suggest she was a supportive mother who turned a blind eye to her sons' delinquent behaviors, while others imply she was complicit in their criminal endeavors. Regardless, her unwavering loyalty to her sons was evident, as she often sought to aid them during their incarcerations and legal troubles. By the late 1920s, with her sons frequently imprisoned, Ma Barker faced financial hardships and lived in impoverished conditions. The family's criminal trajectory took a significant turn in the early 1930s when Fred Barker was released from prison and partnered with Alvin Creepy Karpis, forming the notorious Barker-Karpis gang. This alliance marked the beginning of a series of high-profile crimes, including bank robberies and kidnappings, that would capture national attention and solidify the Barkers' place in the annals of American crime history. Alvin Creepy Karpis. Early life of Alvin Creepy Karpis. Birth name, Alvin Francis Karpis. Born, August 10, 1907, in Montreal, Canada. Family background. His family, of Lithuanian descent, moved to Topeka, Kansas, when he was young. His father was a railway worker, and his mother was a homemaker. Childhood traits. Known for his sharp intelligence, yet he had a rebellious and defiant nature from an early age. Early criminal beginnings. First crimes. By his early teens, Karpis had already started engaging in petty crimes such as burglary and car theft. Reform school. At the age of 10, he was sent to a juvenile detention center for theft, marking the beginning of his deep-rooted criminal path. Escape and escalation. Karpis eventually escaped from juvenile detention, refusing to abide by the system and continuing to engage in criminal activities. Partnership with Fred Barker. Kansas State Penitentiary. By the 1920s, Karpis was convicted of theft and sent to Kansas State Penitentiary in Lansing, Kansas. Meeting Fred Barker. In prison, he met Fred Barker, the son of Ma Barker, who was also serving time for burglary and murder. Formation of the Barker-Karpis gang. The two developed a strong bond, discussing their ambitions for a more structured and profitable criminal career once they were released. Skills and reputation. Strategic mind. Unlike many gangsters of the era, Karpis was known for his methodical planning and attention to detail. Notable nickname. He earned the nickname Creepy due to his unsettling grin and cold, calculating demeanor. Networking with criminals. His time in prison allowed him to make key connections with other criminals who would later assist in major heists and kidnappings. This period in Karpis' life set the stage for his eventual rise as the mastermind behind some of the most infamous crimes of the 1930s. Barker's sons, Fred and Arthur, would become increasingly involved in the gang's operations, engaging in bank robberies and other illegal activities. Their criminal associations stunned local law enforcement. Structure and recruitment. Unlike many gangs of the era, the The Barker-Karpis gang had a unique family structure. The gang was defined not only by financial ambitions, but also by the loyalty fostered among its members, often invoking a sense of familial responsibility. New recruits typically passed through a vetting process that demanded they demonstrate loyalty, skill, and a willingness to adhere to the gang's violent code. This intimate approach enabled the gang to maintain a tight-knit operation, reducing the risk of betrayals from within. The notorious crime spree. With Karpis at the helm, the gang began a crime spree that would make national headlines. Their most infamous crimes included the 1931 Minnesota bank heist. One of the Barker-Karpis gang's most significant robberies occurred in 1931 in Minnesota, where they successfully stole over $200,000, a staggering sum at the time. The gang meticulously planned the heist, using hastily crafted disguises, blueprints of the bank, and an escape strategy that left law enforcement helpless. On the day of the robbery, the gang stormed into the bank armed with Thompson submachine guns, quickly overpowering the guards and staff. While Fred Barker and Karpis secured the money from the vault, other gang members controlled the crowd and ensured no alarm was triggered. Within minutes, they had stuffed bags with cash and fled the scene before police could respond. Their getaway was just as calculated. The gang had prearranged multiple stolen cars along their escape route, switching vehicles several times to throw off authorities. By the time police organized roadblocks, the gang had already disappeared into the Midwest countryside, eluding capture once again. This robbery not only cemented their reputation as master criminals, but also escalated their status as prime targets for law enforcement. Bank robberies across the Midwest. The Barker-Karpis gang executed a series of meticulously planned bank heists across states like Missouri, Minnesota, and Illinois. Unlike other gangs of the era, they carefully scouted locations, monitored police activity, and used stolen vehicles to evade capture. Kidnappings. The gang's activities extended to high-profile kidnappings, which they orchestrated to secure lucrative ransoms. The Barker-Karpis gang epitomized the criminal landscape of the 1930s, capitalizing on the economic hardships of the Great Depression to engage in a series of high-profile crimes. Among their most notorious exploits were the kidnappings of William Ham and Edward Bremer, which not only highlighted their audacity, but also exposed them to intensified law enforcement scrutiny. This section provides an in-depth examination of both kidnappings, exploring their planning, execution, aftermath, and the implications for the gang. Kidnapping of William Ham, 1933. Background of William Ham. William Ham was a wealthy brewer and the owner of Ham Brewing Company in St. Paul, Minnesota. By the 1930s, Ham had built a substantial fortune, making him a prime target for kidnapping, particularly given the economic climate where desperate criminals sought lucrative ransoms. His social standing and the wealth of his business made him a high-profile victim for any gang willing to take the risk. Planning the kidnapping. Intelligence gathering. The Barker-Karpis gang, known for their meticulous planning, likely spent weeks observing Ham's routine. They would have noted his daily schedule, social engagements, and routinely traveled routes, allowing them to prepare for the abduction. Choosing the right time and place. On April 15, 1933, Ham was kidnapped near his home as he returned from a meeting with friends. The timing was crucial. It was late afternoon, and the area was relatively quiet, providing the gang with the opportunity to strike without immediate resistance. Execution of the plan. The gang members, led by Creepy Karpis, ambushed Ham and forced him into their vehicle. The execution was swift and efficient, showing the gang's experience in executing kidnappings and evading captures. They later transported Ham to a hideout, where he was kept in isolation to prevent his escape or the ability to alert authorities. Ransom and negotiation. Ransom demand. The gang issued a ransom demand for $100,000, a staggering sum at the time. They communicated through written letters, using coded language to mask their identities and minimize suspicion. Negotiations. Ham's family worked with law enforcement during negotiations, ensuring the money was delivered while attempting to gauge Ham's safety. Law enforcement officials worked discreetly to avoid detection and intervention from the gang. Payment. After days of intense negotiation, Ham's family raised the ransom amount and handed it over to the kidnappers. The ransom was divided into small denominations, adding to the complexity of the transaction. The successful payment led to the eventual release of Ham. Aftermath and impact. Release of Ham. On April 25, 1933, after 10 days in captivity, Ham was released unharmed. However, his psychological condition had suffered due to the ordeal. Legal consequences. The successful execution of this kidnapping heightened the Barker-Karpis gang's notoriety, drawing the attention of law enforcement agencies. It showcased their ability to orchestrate high-stakes crimes without immediate repercussions, but it also planted the seeds of their eventual downfall. Media coverage and public reaction. The media frenzy around Ham's kidnapping brought national attention to the gang, prompting alarm and fascination across the country. Their exploits fed into the growing mythology of the American outlaw, making the Barker-Karpis gang both infamous and sensationalized. Kidnapping of Edward Bremer, 1934. Background of Edward Bremer. Edward Bremer was a prominent banker in Minnesota with influential ties, including connections to President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Barker-Karpis gang, seeking to further their criminal ambitions and financial gain, naturally identified Bremer as a lucrative target. Planning the kidnapping. Reconnaissance. Similar to their previous kidnapping, the gang undertook extensive reconnaissance of Bremer's habits and routines. Bremer frequently traveled to his bank, and the gang observed his movements closely, ensuring they had a solid understanding of his schedule. Selection of the location. On January 17, 1934, the gang executed their plan as Bremer left a friend's house in St. Paul. They struck quickly and accurately, abducting him right before he could reach safety. Execution. The kidnapping was executed as smoothly as Ham's. The gang members seized Bremer, forced him into a vehicle, and quickly fled the scene to their designated hideout. Ransom and negotiation. Ransom demand. The gang demanded a ransom of $200,000, twice the amount secured from Ham's kidnapping. The exorbitant figure reflected not only their growing confidence, but also the increased risks they were willing to take as their notoriety grew. Negotiations. The negotiations for Bremer's release mirrored those from the Ham case, involving law enforcement while keeping the family in discussion with the kidnappers. Bremer's connections caused concern that if something went wrong, it could attract unwanted federal attention. Payment strategy. The ransom payment involved creating a network for delivering the cash. Bremer's family coordinated with authorities to lay out conditions that would guarantee his safe return. Release and fallout. Release of Bremer. After a lengthy negotiation process, Bremer was released on January 30, 1934. He returned home physically unharmed, but the psychological impact of the ordeal weighed heavily on him. Increased law enforcement scrutiny. Bremer's connections to President Roosevelt raised alarm within federal law enforcement agencies, including the FBI. This crime was no longer just a local issue but a national concern, leading the FBI, under Hoover, to prioritize the capture of the Barker-Karpis gang. FBI investigation and tactics. The high-profile nature of Bremer's kidnapping led to the FBI deploying advanced tactics to gather intelligence on the gang's whereabouts. They began to increase surveillance on known associates and utilized informants, demonstrating a significant shift in their approach to organized crime. Media sensation. The kidnapping of Bremer captured national headlines. His ties to the president not only drew public curiosity, but also outrage, highlighting the audacity of the Barker-Karpis gang and solidifying their status as America's leading criminals. The kidnappings of William Ham and Edward Bremer serve as pivotal moments in the history of the Barker-Karpis gang. These events showcase their audacity, meticulous planning, and ability to manipulate the situation to their advantage. However, they also brought heightened law enforcement scrutiny that ultimately led to the network's unraveling. The aftermath of these kidnappings illustrated the consequences of their actions, not only for the gang, but also for American society, which began to grapple with the rise of organized crime amidst economic despair. As the FBI intensified its pursuit of the perpetrators, they moved toward strategies that would ultimately bring the gang to justice and alter the landscape of law enforcement in America forever. In retrospect, the exploits of the Barker-Karpis gang reflect broader themes of ambition, morality, and the pursuit of wealth in a time of hardship, rendering their legacy a rich topic for continued exploration in criminal history and American culture. murders, and shootouts. The gang's willingness to resort to violence set them apart from many of their contemporaries. Shootouts with police and rival gangs became increasingly common, leading to significant loss of life. Law enforcement confrontations. Law enforcement's growing frustration with the gang resulted in several violent encounters. A notable shootout in 1933 in St. Paul left 2 police officers dead, illustrating the brutal lengths the gang would go to in order to evade capture. The relationship between Mob Barker and Creepy Karpis. The relationship between Mob Barker and Creepy Karpis was complex and multifaceted. They shared a criminal partnership that governed decisions and strategies within the gang, propelled by both mutual respect and a shared ambition. Dependence and dynamics. Collaborative criminal planning. Karpis's expertise complemented Mob Barker's leadership. His strategic mind and her organizational skills resulted in well-executed plans that increased the gang's notoriety. Power dynamics. In many cases, Mob Barker exercised power over Karpis and her sons, enforcing her authority with an unwavering demeanor. Yet this relationship was not devoid of camaraderie. Their interactions often reflected a mutual trust in their criminal endeavors. Maternal influence. Mob Barker was deeply dedicated to her sons, infusing a sense of loyalty and family bonding into the gang structure. This connection assisted in forging strong alliances among the gang members, rendering them willing to risk everything for Ma's protection. Law enforcement response. The Barker-Karpis gang's activities captured the attention of law enforcement agencies, especially as the gang became more brazen in their criminal exploits. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, recognized the pressing need to dismantle such a formidable gang. Features of law enforcement tactics. National manhunt. The violence and notoriety surrounding the gang prompted a widespread manhunt across multiple states. Local and federal authorities coordinated their efforts more openly, sharing information rapidly through modern communication. Development of improved tactics. Law enforcement began to adopt more sophisticated investigative tactics. The FBI started employing surveillance techniques, informant networks, and forensic science to gather evidence, marking a significant transition from traditional policing methods. Public relations campaigns. The FBI utilized public awareness campaigns to inform citizens about the gang's activities, encouraging them to report suspicious activity. The iconic image of Ma Barker began to emerge in news media, transforming her from a ruthless criminal into a public figure synonymous with crime. The downfall of the Barker-Karpis gang. As intensified law enforcement efforts began to bear fruit, the gang ultimately faced a series of significant setbacks that led to its downfall. Search and capture of Fred Barker. In late 1934, Fred Barker was captured. Under duress, he provided police with critical information about the gang's operations, exposing their hideouts and accomplices. The end of the Ma Barker gang, the final shootout. The climax of the Ma Barker gang's criminal saga culminated in January 1935. After years of brazen crimes that included bank robberies, kidnappings, and violent encounters with law enforcement, the gang's last stand took place in a cottage in Florida. This shootout not only marked a dramatic conclusion to Ma Barker's life and criminal career, but also represented a pivotal victory for federal law enforcement agencies determined to dismantle organized crime. This detailed account explores the circumstances leading to the shootout, the events during the confrontation, and the repercussions that followed. Context and background. The decline of the Barker-Karpis gang. By early 1935, the Barker-Karpis gang, once recognized for their audacious crimes, faced mounting pressure from law enforcement. The aftermath of high-profile kidnappings, combined with the increased focus of federal agents, set the stage for a confrontation that would end in bloodshed. Escalating law enforcement pressure. The federal government intensified its campaign against organized crime, particularly targeting the Barker-Karpis gang after the kidnappings of William Ham and Edward Bremer. J. Edgar Hoover, as the head of the FBI, made clear that capturing Ma Barker and her sons was a priority, especially given the national attention brought forth by their criminal activities. Increased surveillance. Law enforcement began employing modern investigative techniques, including surveillance and informant networks, to gather intelligence on the gang's movements. The apprehension of Fred Barker in a series of operations led to the revelation of the gang's potential hideouts. Identity and location. Ma Barker and her son Fred were believed to be hiding out in Florida, which at the time was a popular location for criminals seeking to evade authorities. The perception of Florida as a vacation destination obscured its reality as a refuge for outlaws. Location of the final hideout. The gang's final hideout was a modest cottage located in a remote area of Ocklawaha, Florida. The cottage provided seclusion but was not far from populated areas. This setting was conducive to both concealment from authorities and the eventual confrontation that was to unfold. Abandonment of caution. By early January 1935, the increasing pressure from law enforcement led the gang to adopt a more desperate and reckless approach. Their lack of caution manifested in an open and audacious lifestyle while hiding in Florida, which ultimately contributed to their discovery. The final shootout. Tracking down Ma Barker and Fred. Federal agents raid. On January 16, 1935, a tip-off, likely from a network of informants or surveillance intelligence, pointed the FBI toward Ma Barker's location in Florida. Federal agents, under the direction of the FBI, planned a coordinated raid to capture her and Fred. Preparation for confrontation. The FBI recognized the potential for violence during the operation. As they approached the cottage, agents were strategically positioned, and they anticipated the resistance they might face, particularly given the gang's history of violent confrontations with law enforcement. Confrontation at the cottage. The encounter begins. The afternoon of January 16th was tense, with federal agents surrounding the cottage before breaching the entrance. As agents called for Ma Barker and Fred to surrender, they were met with gunfire from within the cottage. Reports detail that Ma Barker and Fred opened fire on the officers using firearms, demonstrating their willingness to resist arrest. Intense gunfight. The shootout quickly escalated into an intense gun battle. Using their advantage of familiarity with the hideout, Ma Barker and Fred exchanged fire with the agents, who responded with their own weaponry. The ensuing firefight lasted for several minutes, during which both sides furiously exchanged gunfire. Casualties. Accounts indicated that several agents sustained injuries during the gunfight. However, the precise number of casualties remains unclear due to the chaotic nature of the event. Eyewitness accounts and reports from law enforcement acknowledge that the firepower deployed by both parties was significant, heightening the danger. Ma Barker's death. The fatal shot. As the confrontation continued, federal agents worked to gain better positioning. Reports from the scene indicate that Ma Barker was hit by gunfire during the intense exchange. Circumstances of her death. There are conflicting accounts regarding the exact circumstances surrounding her death. Some reports suggest that Ma Barker, despite being wounded, continued to fire back at the officers, determined to protect herself and her son. Confirmation of death. By late afternoon, the gunfire subsided, and federal agents moved into the cottage to confirm the situation. Ma Barker was found deceased, with reports highlighting that she had been killed by bullets fired during the shootout. The dramatic nature of her death, a criminal matriarch dying in battle, complemented her infamous legacy. Aftermath of the shootout. Impact on law enforcement. The death of Ma Barker marked a significant victory for law enforcement. It was a symbolic end to the reign of terror caused by the Barker-Karpis gang. The successful operation underscored law enforcement's evolving tactics in combating organized crime and their commitment to pursuing even the most notorious criminals. Barker's legacy. Ma Barker's death contributed to her posthumous image as both a criminal leader and a mother fiercely protecting her family. Many accounts romanticized her legacy, transforming her into a folk figure of American crime history. The circumstances of her demise led to the continued fascination with her life, feeding into media narratives that depicted organized crime as a desperate response to societal plight. Public reaction and media coverage. The media coverage of Ma Barker's shooting was extensive. Headlines portrayed the dramatic confrontation and the violent end of one of America's most infamous gangs. This heightened societal interest in organized crime, culminating in sensational portrayals of criminals and their lives. The fate of Fred Barker. After Ma's death, Fred Barker was captured but continued to face serious legal consequences. He was ultimately convicted for his criminal activities and received a lengthy prison sentence. The aftermath of Ma Barker's death led to the eventual collapse of the Barker-Karpis gang. as remaining members went into hiding or were apprehended by law enforcement. The final shootout in Florida represents a dramatic and pivotal moment in the history of the Barker-Karpis gang. Ma Barker's death brought an end to her influence, marking the conclusion of her criminal career that had spanned several years. This event highlights the complexities of organized crime, the relentless pursuit of law enforcement, and the societal response to criminals during a tumultuous time in American history. The confrontation reveals the tragic, bloody reality of crime while simultaneously capturing the public imagination, ensuring that Ma Barker's legacy endures. The final shootout serves as a poignant reminder of the intersections between desperation, violence, and the human condition, reflecting the enduring themes of crime and justice in American culture. Creepy Karpis's arrest. Following Ma's death, Karpis evaded capture for an extended period. However, he was eventually arrested in 1936 after a short-lived reign as one of the country's most wanted criminals. This apprehension effectively dismantled the Barker-Karpis operation. Legacy and cultural impact. The story of Ma Barker and Creepy Karpis resonates well beyond their active years as criminals. Their legacy continues to shape societal perspectives on crime and justice. Cultural representations. Media and films. The media has portrayed the Barker-Karpis gang in numerous adaptations. Films, such as Public Enemies, and historical retrospectives romanticize their story, often ignoring the brutality behind their crimes. This contributed to an enduring fascination with the American outlaw archetype. Public fascination with crime figures. Ma Barker and Karpis's infamy sparked public interest in criminal life. Their stories fed into a broader cultural narrative that glamorized the outlaw lifestyle, framing them as anti-heroes in a society plagued by economic despair. Historical context and analysis. Scholars have analyzed the socio-economic environment of the Great Depression, examining how it spawned widespread criminality. Ma Barker's and Karpis's stories reveal the intersection of desperation and opportunity, highlighting systemic failures that allowed crime to flourish during this period. Psychological analysis. Family dynamics in crime. The Barker-Karpis gang illustrates how family loyalty can entangle the dynamics of criminal organizations. Ma's authoritarian style entwined her children's psychology with crime, demonstrating how family ties can foster or exacerbate criminal behavior. Moral complexity. Ma Barker's character presents a contradiction. She was a mother seeking security for her family and a ruthless criminal. This duality prompts discussions about the nature of morality in times of hardship, raising questions about motivations in criminal undertakings. Shifting gender roles. Ma Barker's influence as a female figure in organized crime highlights shifting gender roles in the 1930s. Her dominion in a male-dominated field challenges traditional notions of femininity and power, making her a complex character in discussions about gender in the criminal world. Conclusion. The story of Ma Barker and Alvin Creepy Karpis is one of crime, controversy, and the blurred lines between truth and legend. Their reign of terror encapsulated the desperate and violent times of the Great Depression, where organized crime flourished and law enforcement struggled to keep pace. The Barker-Karpis gang's methods, particularly their high-profile kidnappings, forced federal authorities to refine their crime-fighting tactics. The FBI, under J. Edgar Hoover, used their pursuit as a defining moment in shaping modern law enforcement, ensuring that criminals of this magnitude would never again operate so freely. The gang's downfall marked a shift from the lawless banditry of the early 20th century to the more methodical and coordinated approach of the federal government in tackling crime. Ma Barker's legacy remains disputed. Was she a criminal mastermind or merely a mother unwilling to leave her sons behind? The truth may never be fully known. But what is certain is that her violent demise at Ocklawaha cemented her in history as one of the most infamous figures of the gangster era. Whether as a willing participant or an unwilling bystander, she played a crucial role in one of the deadliest crime syndicates of the 1930s. As for Alvin Karpis, his fate diverged from that of his fellow criminals. Unlike Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, or Babyface Nelson, who met their ends in gunfights, Karpis lived long enough to reflect on his past. His later interviews and writings shed light on the gang's inner workings, often contradicting the FBI's narrative. Yet, despite his survival, his name remains overshadowed by the spectacle of Ma Barker's dramatic end. The legacy of the Barker-Karpis gang is not just a tale of crime and punishment. It is a case study of how America responded to the rise of organized crime. Their exploits, filled with daring heists, cold-blooded murders, and notorious kidnappings, serve as a grim reminder of a time when outlaws ruled the roads and the federal government was still finding its footing in the war against crime. Their story endures, not just in history books, but in the continued fascination with an era where criminals became legends and lawmen fought to bring them down.